Well, the closing arguments in the sexual assault trial of Jian Ghomeshi are now complete, and all we really are awaiting is the decision of the judge on the matter. So it's probably a good time to reflect maybe on some of the lessons of the case. And one of the things that was most striking to me was that this trial is in some ways the result of a sort of unofficial policy at the Toronto Police, particularly in the sex crimes unit, which is responsible obviously for investigating cases like this, where it appears that people who claim to be sexually abused are automatically believed. 100%, the head of the sex crimes unit said at the time that Mr. Ghomeshi was being investigated. She was speaking generally about victims of sex assault, but it was a press conference about the three women who had come forward at that time to make allegations against him. And this Inspector Joanna Bevan Desjardins said in several ways and several times at this press conference, from the get-go, we believe women. We believe them 100%. We're all about the victim. Etc. And I find it, frankly, an astonishing remark. I don't think that an investigative agency like a police force should see its first job to comfort those who are purportedly hurt by crime, but rather to properly and thoroughly investigate it. We don't know everything about how this particular investigation proceeded, except that we know, for instance, that the first complainant against Mr. Ghomeshi was interviewed once for less than an hour. We know that two of the complainants came forward with 11th hour, late in the day disclosures that dramatically contradicted the narrative they'd spun in public and to the police under oath. And that in one of those instances, when they were giving a second statement to police, it took all of 9 minutes and the interview wasn't even recorded. That suggests to me that there's a presumption of guilt that operates actually in the sex crimes unit. And I think that's wrong, and I think it's scary and dangerous. And it's not the first time that this unit in recent weeks has demonstrated the troubling effects of that. In late January, I think it was, a charge of sex assault was dismissed against a Brazilian soccer player who had, amid much fanfare during the Pan Am Games or shortly after, been charged with sexually assaulting somebody and portrayed as a rapist, even though in that case the police unusually had consulted Crown attorneys who told them, you don't have a case, don't proceed. And they proceeded anyway, and they, shredded the man's reputation. So that's one cautionary note from this trial. Probably the other is the misperception that this trial shows women that they should not come forward to authorities with allegations of sexual assault because, golly, look what happens to them. Nothing could be further from the truth. The women in this case, two of whom were absolutely discredited completely, Lucy Ducater and the third complainant, wholly discredited in their testimony, did it to themselves. And they did it to themselves by editing their memories. And this is not the effect of trauma. Trauma messes with your memories, perhaps, but it doesn't see you only take out the stuff that might reflect poorly on you and leave in the stuff that reflects badly on the man you're accusing. So that's another lesson from this case, I think, is not that women shouldn't come forward with allegations of anything, whether it's sexual assault or anything else, but that when you come forward, be honest, be truthful in your statements. You don't have to edit your memory in order to make the case stronger. That's not your job. And I guess finally, to me anyway, the real message is, and it's one everybody, particularly the press and the public, should keep in mind, the presumption is supposed to be the presumption of innocence. That's what's supposed to be operating here, not the presumption of guilt.